Hello, everyone, and I'm excited to have with me a guest today named Brit. He's someone who's not unfamiliar to a lot of Rochester residents and a concerned citizen in our community who ran a very successful campaign for mayor a few years ago. And we're here to talk about this last election and what were some of the takeaways from this election. So, Britt Nozier, thank you very much for coming along today. It's nice to see you.
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I followed your work online, and I see that you're a concerned citizen as well, and are very involved in many ways. And I know some people think you're controversial, but I find the stuff I've seen that you've done to be very genuine. And most of the time, for the most part, agree with it. So I appreciate the work that you've done, and I wish the campaign for mayor had been successful. I think it was impactful, if nothing else. And I know we weren't working directly together, but I know you were involved in that campaign as well, as a citizen on your own, and put a lot of effort into it. So I saw what you were doing, and I appreciated any help I could get. So thank you very much.
Well, you're welcome. And a lot of people were paying attention in those days, and even more people are paying attention now. It's really nice for me to be able to sit down on the bench for a while and take a breather, because there's plenty of other people doing a similar amount of activism as I was, and several other people were really hitting it hard. A few years ago, I mean, going back over a long number of years, maybe there'll be time someday to talk about the history of those days, but um, we've just had another election and we've seen a takeover in this city. I've been talking with a number of other people about their reviews, and they see that this new city council is extremely much more of the same as it was before. But we've lost a couple of fair-minded people, people concerned with transparency in terms of Molly Dennis. But that was something Mayor Norton wanted to see happen. Molly Dennis has gone away. And there was another loss of course, Mark Bransford decided not to run again, and
Mhm.
he seemed like a very fine, a concerned citizen, again, concerned about transparency. He clashed oftentimes with Molly Dennis and others, but our elected officials are meant to be engaged in this kind of struggle with each other. They're not expected to be a team. I'm already talking too much. I don't usually do that, but to you, I have a lot that I would want to say, because I was happy about your run for mayor, and I thought it was a very good race and a good campaign, and it was unfortunate that people didn't all work together to make it happen. But
Yes, well, I ran out of frustration about what was going on and how things were going with the city, and that's why this latest election was difficult. Locally, I think we had some big hurdles, and when you look at the primary election, it looked like some more local, fair-minded people were going to have a chance, and then something that you have addressed at length, nonprofit named Isaiah Minnesota, Faith in Minnesota, became very deeply involved. And this is an organization that, to the untrained ear, sounds like something good and something that we would appreciate. They masquerade under the banner of being a religious umbrella group, and that they're just interested in helping people, when in reality they have an agenda that will make Rochester into Minneapolis. During my campaign for mayor, I sort of stumbled on a word, Minneapolisation. And I think when you look at Rochester and you look at our mayor and our outgoing city council president, you see that you have people very much aligned with this point of view, and they don't have the best interests of the citizens at hand. More, they have the best interests of these political partisan agendas. And here we are in Rochester again. You have on the coast some of the rejection of some of these ideas, these sort of the race baiting and the diversity, equity, inclusion, and all these other political issues. And those are starting to be jettisoned by people further along than Rochester, and we seem to be behind the curve again. And here we are, doubling down on all these bad ideas with these outside organizations. So I was disappointed to see, especially now you have the president of the Rochester City Council incoming, who is also a Mayo bureaucrat. So you
Yeah.
now have a Mayo bureaucrat running the city. You have a complete, symbiotic meshing of these two organizations. And I don't know, there's so many, when I start to think about these things now, and I've kept paying attention after my campaign, I feel like a fire hose. I mean, there's just a million ways we could go with this and talk about all these different things that are all interconnected. And I think that's something that I appreciate that you've done, the interconnectivity of all these issues, the crime, the political agendas, et cetera. And now to have, the city of Rochester writes the bonds for Mayo Clinic. They write their bonds through us. So I want to know, even though it's a nonprofit, am I going to get a dividend payment or whatever? So I don't know. I don't know where we go from here, but we must stay involved. So I think we need to break down, how did this happen? So I think that's a starting place.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the nonprofit group Isaiah Minnesota and then Faith in Minnesota, also a nonprofit. I use the air quotes because, of course, they're extremely lucrative, profitable organizations that raise money from Lord knows where. We don't really have tracers on some of those LLCs that donate. There's an individual in Berkeley, California, who makes $72,000 a year for raising money for Isaiah, Minnesota, somehow from Berkeley, California. Her name doesn't come to mind right now. In fact, I did an extensive post with research on her with all original source material, and it was pulled down off the internet because I had shown all of her references in her public philanthropic work and how much money she made from it. But the name will come to me later. But she makes $72,000 a year just for her client, Isaiah, Minnesota. And then this Faith in Minnesota group sounds like a strange new religious group. It sounds like we're supposed to have faith in Minnesota. I mean, if you take it literally instead of as a slogan, if you look at it as verbiage, faith in Minnesota, it's like you have a religious fervor or belief in statism. It's like you're believing in the government. And it's really strange how successful they were. They took a victory lap in the Rochester Post Bulletin, and they were given kudos for having won all of these seats. And their guy, Randy Schubring, you mentioned, longtime DFLer, Democrat Party guy. Isn't that a success of this election, though, that we can pretend, or we don't need to pretend that everything is nonpartisan anymore? That might be a good positive takeaway.
Yes.
Norton endorsed him.
Right. And I am one of the people that feels like the nonpartisan nature of our local government, where we're talking about our friends and neighbors that we live with and in our community, that it really is better to stay nonpartisan. But you can see that when you look at Faith in Minnesota, the way they came in with these candidates, and their candidates were all basically behind by the numbers after the primary, and they came in and they worked so hard, and they brought in paid volunteers from outside of the area, and they also do it. Let's be honest, we don't want to just stomp our feet. They did a good job. They recruit people. They recruited local people too. They weren't all paid volunteers, and they convinced people to go out. And I think just like on a national level, where you had the political parties sort of copying each other's playbook, we are going to need to do that in Rochester. In Minnesota, greater Minnesota would be great too, but Rochester. And I think when you looked at the primary numbers, that there is a possibility, even in a very purple, almost blue area like Rochester is. I think there's a way for us all to work together. But in order to do this, we are going to have to become Isaiah, Minnesota. We are going to have to learn to raise money and recruit the way they did. Now, I think it's possible, but you had Sean Palmer, for instance. Let's talk about Sean Palmer. I talked to him several times, and I thought he had a good chance of winning. Personally, I felt like he might have been compromising on some and being too wishy-washy. But I think more so than that, even he needed to have more surrogates. I think he was a little overconfident after the primary, where he took the majority in the primary, and I think he was a little overconfident and maybe didn't work as hard as he could. Next time we do this, it doesn't matter who's running. If I'm running, and I don't care, I never needed to be an elected official. I just want people in there who care about our city and care about keeping, the unique essence of Rochester intact. The next person who runs is going to need to have everybody. You and I know that our local traditional conservative politics, there's a lot of division and there's a lot of infighting. We suffer with this much more so than progressives. Progressives tend to unify. We need to unify next time. All the people, and when I ran against Brad Tron in the primary, I came up against this. There were Tron partisans, and then there were, obviously there were more Noser partisans ultimately, but it has to be, everyone has to get on the same page. And when you have somebody like Sean Palmer running, or somebody like me running, who's a local person who wants to make the best decision for the citizens, everybody needs to get on board. I had a lot of surrogates the last time. I need more surrogates. In other words, people who are willing to go out and convince others on my behalf or on Palmer's behalf that he is the right person for the job. And if we don't do this, we'll never beat Isaiah, Minnesota. They have paid, even if their volunteers are volunteers, their staff is paid, and we don't have that. We don't do that. We don't have the Tides Fund. We could do a whole nother thing about nonprofits, the Tides Foundation,
Right.
not the detergent, the black money clearinghouse that makes sure that these people, they never lack money. We always lack money. And here we are, the local people, and this isn't about people who were born here, just I was born here, but it's not, you could come, just like if you moved to a small town in Spain, you wouldn't go there and start trying to make it like Rochester, Minnesota. And
right.
And so, yeah, I'm rambling
The
too.
colonizer.
But we have to come together. And if like-minded people are going to say, I'm not going to support you, or I've heard people say about Wes Lund, I'm not going to support Wes Lund because I don't agree with him on this. Well, if you can't recognize someone like Wes Lund, who's passionate about the local community and local things that average people, regular, average citizens, because that's all I am. I'm just an average citizen. If you can't see somebody that's focusing on those things and agree that they can be part of the team, then we'll never win. So just, we'll all die apart then. That's what will ultimately happen, in my opinion.
Right. Right. It was astonishing to do as well as we did, which was humbling in a sense. But election shenanigans aside, I don't believe any of the shenanigans, if they were investigated, would overturn the sheer numbers of the force of the blue side. But it might, be worthy of a different podcast on another day to talk about some of the anomalies that took place in Olmsted County. I mean, there's no explanation for there being 0 precincts reported at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and in only my race.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
0 precincts reporting and 0 votes tallied. It's interesting, but no, the money is a huge question mark, because I've said we could win elections on energy and ideas and we wouldn't need money. But of course, you're up against the Democrat Party machine, which, I just, to show one document here, I printed out the Donations. I just love showing original source material. I printed out the donations just offered. Alita Baroud is a huge money making machine out of the. I mean, how does she have all this? I do not know her worth, but yeah, she donates to lots of political campaigns, and she has a ton of money. And who knows how these donations come to her and how they move on, but there's, a lot of money there. I don't have that much money. That's a lot of free speech. But Olivia Bergen would be some low hanging fruit worthy of looking at too. The Isaiah, Minnesota group leader from Massachusetts, who has suddenly taken, at New York University graduate, worked and lived in the Middle East, and now suddenly she's our political activist, and she's filibustering 3 months worth of meetings at city council meetings. Inexplicably, she's given 20 minutes, 30 minutes to speak during study sessions. And there's, she's not from here. Again, I'm not being exclusionary, but why is she here and affecting, a public policy? She also helped pass the school board referendum, and I'm not aware that she's a property tax payer in Olmsted County, much less ISD 535. It's like, why would you move into a political action group in our area if you're not a property taxpayer? I don't know that she is. I don't know where she lives. I haven't, I haven't looked into her situation to that extent. But it's not an organic. It's not, if you will, it's not a grassroots movement. If you have a paid political activist sort of parachuted into our town who is running the tables with the Sierra group that's connected. Mayor Norton's a supporter of that group, and running the tables with all of these political groups.
That's a good point that you made right there. And this is something that I have thought about. Rochester has been targeted, and it's important to realize that. And I like the information that you are disseminating and the information that you just had right there. I think it's important for the average person, and it's hard for us to do this, but we have to work harder. We need more people doing local podcasts or spreading information, because we have been targeted by these far left groups. And Mayo Clinic has been, I mean, this is a whole nother topic we could talk about. I talked about it during my campaign. And I always say how much I love Mayo Clinic and how much I appreciated growing up in Rochester. And Mayo Clinic is just an amazing thing. But that doesn't mean that it can't be criticized. And they've been targeted too. In fact, I know some, I don't know if I'd call them whistleblowers, but I know some former employees of Mayo that could give some really eye-opening information. And, maybe sometime if we do this again, or if this works out, we could add somebody to and have a discussion about that. But Rochester has been targeted, and that's kind of what we're talking about today. What went wrong, and how can we change it? How can we do better? And part of that is you have to be aware. You have to study what happened, and you have to be aware of what happened. And these groups, like you said, coming to the city council, trying to make it appear as if it were organic. And again, it's just organized politics, and in sleepy old Rochester, we're not ready for that. And Palmer wasn't ready for it. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the intimate details of his campaign, but I think he thought that he had a real good chance, and he's made a lot of relationships. And like I said, he had a lot of surrogates, but it wasn't enough. And it was I think a little closer than my race for a citywide election, and I had support too. Let's face it, to win on a local level, yeah, we're talking about two things. We're talking about the partisan elections and then the local elections, which are partisan, right down to DMC. That's another thing we could talk about, by the way, in regard to Mayo. Yep. Look at DMC is loaded with Democrats, R.T. Ryback, and the guy Patrick Sneeb, who runs the business, economic development part of that. The guy is a political appointee, he's a political act, like Randy Schubring. I mean, all these people, again, this is all tying it together. This is the weaving it all together. Randy Schubring, he's on the Minneapolis Airport Commission. He's
Right.
he's a golden boy of the Met Council. He's
Well,
run for office many times, and now he got in here. This is not some local guy.
St. Paul, and then he came down here, and he was appointed by Mark Dayton to the airport commission, and then reappointed by Tim Walz to the airport commission, and Randy Schubring was running hip to hip with all the DFLers, and went to their fundraisers and proclaimed that he proclaimed, well, I'm running for city council, and it's a nonprofit, sorry,
Partisan.
a nonpartisan position, but I'm on your side. I'm on your side. And he reassured the DFL that he was going to be right there with them. So it was understood that he was part of the machinery. And of course, what do you really prove by resigning from your position with the Mayo Clinic for a couple of years, where you're being paid as not an activist, but what do you call it? A person a lobbyist.
A
You're
lobbyist, yeah.
a public relations lobbyist guy for the Mayo Clinic, and then you claim that you're going to represent the interests of Rochester. And doesn't the Mayo Clinic have already enough? I mean, I don't want to like just screed against the Mayo Clinic, but don't they already have enough representation in government, whether it's, people at the
Writing their
state,
bonds.
people writing the bonds of the city? And
I
how
want to get to the bottom of that, but yeah, go ahead.
does that work? Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's
No,
a
it,
topic, yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's all right. I was talking too much.
No, no. But it's when you're talking, I'm thinking of these other, and it's we have to be careful that we don't seem like a bunch of whiners and
Right.
complaining. And we have to do a little bit of that because we have, I feel like we've been taken advantage of. But it's critically important. It matters. You too could be a prominent, whomever. We act like the people that are appointed to these things, like the airport commission. We act like they just went out into the private sector and found the most successful people that they could and put them on. And it's just important we're giving the inside baseball of these people. Randy Schubring, yeah, he's a partisan, and so am I. I have my national political affiliations, but my career was just working in the private sector. I pay attention to politics, therefore I have certain views. This guy is a political animal, though. This is basically like a career politician. Sure, he's had a little bit more of a work life than like Mayor Norton, for instance, who is a completely manufactured political animal. Nice person now. We always get accused of making these personal attacks. It's not a personal attack. She's the times when I interacted with her when I was running for mayor, she seemed like a nice person. But this isn't, she sought out this position. Randy is seeking out this position. These people are political animals. And it's important to know that if we are to contradict that. Now, I don't feel like we should contradict it with politics, but exposing that is part of the process of
Right.
getting better leaders in there.
Well, absolutely. And what would be wrong with saying George Soros's son gave a large amount of money to Representative Kim Hicks? Or what would be wrong with pointing out that billionaire Michael Bloomberg is paying for a lot of what happens in Rochester, and he also drops a lot of money on local elections here in Rochester, Minnesota. And you're called a conspiracy theorist by simply pointing that out, and then it turns into a badge of honor that Mayor Norton wears, that Rochester is a Bloomberg city. I don't think a lot of people understand what that means, but it's
Yes.
literature, and it's on her documents. It's on Mayor Norton's documents that Rochester is a Bloomberg city, and Mayor Norton indeed is a Bloomberg mayor. That is actually from their own literature, from their own nomenclature, because she's attended the Bloomberg University for mayors.
Yeah.
Bloomberg has
It's
a university for mayors? That's strange. Why? What's the
well,
curriculum?
yeah,
Maybe.
and it's Democrat. It's Democrat. It's
Yeah.
progressive Democrat Michael Bloomberg. So again, we're not in a nonpartisan situation, and it's it's this condescension from the likes of Mayor Norton, whether she knows she's doing it or not. The city council meetings, her behavior there is something that bears a completely separate discussion. The way she looks down on people, but that, and she may not know she's doing this. I don't know. I remember in one of the debates, not to always bring it back to my experience, my lived experience, but the debate where she was, acting like a child. It was like we were in a fourth grade debate. She couldn't control her emotions. But that aside, it's these people. They think that this is the best candidate, Randy Schubring, Nick Miller, who's whatever. He's a like a 2-year resident of Rochester. I remember him starting to show up at the meetings way back when I was running, and that these are the best and most qualified people that we can have, not local business people or local people who have another life, political animals, career political. That's why I was sad to see Mark Bransford go, although good guy, honorable man. He was a disappointment, though. He failed to stand up to the freight train that is the city staff, and the city staff. That's a whole nother. There's a lot of topics. There's not going to be enough time today to touch on all these, but hopefully scratching the surface. But again, the main focus of what we're talking about today is what happened. What can we do next time to make sure that local citizens are represented? And part of it's just waking them up. I mean, we got out hustled, and
there needs to be an information war where we carry out all of this data on multiple fronts and help them understand and say, people, these deals are going down, whether you know it or not. You can't just accept it if they're calling people conspiracy theorists, because it's really real. This money's being spent locally to transform and colonize, in a sense, the people of Rochester. And if you're silent about that, then you're giving your consent to be governed by that.
Yes. And I like the way you said you need to know that these deals are going down. That's exactly what's happening. And if you don't have, you're, as an average citizen, you're not in the room. What you think or what you care. If you would put something like Discovery Walk or the Peace Fountain, Peace Plaza destruction, where they spent, $50 million on these two things, and nobody, you're not in the room, you're not in the deal. And what that means is, if you don't have a representative that's going to come to it from the average citizen's perspective, not like, oh my gosh, we have to have bus rapid transit. That's another whole topic for discussion that, I was just making a comment on social media the other day, and somebody said, well, it's mostly coming from the federal government. Now,
it's free.
We know that. I'm guessing this, but most people are like, yeah, it's coming from the federal government. It's a mentality that we're losing. We're losing the war because that's their argument, that it's, and it's a Bloomberg grant. So why wouldn't we want something free? It's like the League of Cities. That's another thing. See, there's no way we can cover everything in this like 30 minutes, but
yeah,
it's, that's another thing where they push these racial divide. They push affordable housing, which is really just code for getting you into corporate housing and making sure that, you never own a home, and so you don't hurt the environment and all these things. All this stuff in Rochester. I mean, I know a lot of these things, but I mean, going back, the politicians who may have been nice people. Most people are good people, but they unwittingly led us down the primrose path of green energy. Look at just as I'm just rambling here about the Mayor Norton put in geothermal energy at the government center, and we spent millions doing it. And it's I don't know everything about geothermal, but one guy told me who knows about it, who installs it, says, you have to have a loop that runs parallel into the ground, where you dig straight down like they did there. They said you never make the money back. So these performative things that are done in our city that waste our money, it matters. Look at your property taxes. I mean, that's a whole nother That's a whole nother iceberg to,
So there's an iceberg to chip away at.
yeah.
With that, having said that, we're coming up on 30 minutes. So to make sure this is watchable and viewable and turns up as a suggestion, we should end it right there. But we certainly have a lot more things to talk about. There's been a lot of good information packed into these 30 minutes. So go ahead and have the final word, Mr. Nozier. Thank you.
Well, yes, thank you, Wes. I wasn't sure I wanted to do this, but this has been fun to do this. And if this is a way we can get information out, and I feel like I was rambling for some of it. I mean, I can maybe make better notes next time and try to tighten it up. But yeah, I think this is a good way, and you know, it's good to have a little humor in, like I think we've had. I mean, some of these things, it's so sad you laugh, but thank you very much for doing this. And yeah, I'd be up for doing this again. I mean, I could write a list of topics, could probably do 100 of these, but
Yeah, let's definitely do it again sooner rather than later. And I think it's so information packed. I believe that the public loves it when they're not treated like children. And so this was high energy and high information. And we shouldn't assume that, I mean, some people don't want to tell people how the sausage is made, but if you like sausage, this is kind of part of the deal, right?
definitely. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Brit Nozier.
You're welcome. Thank you.